And Miriam, you mentioned assisted dying. I'd like to talk a bit about that now. Have you been following what's been going on in Parliament? Because I have to say that the committee stage of a bill is not normally something that makes makes the news. But there's been a lot of shenanigans with Kim Leadbeater, who's trying to push this bill through, trying to basically get her own way, minimise scrutiny. What have you made of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting, concerning. I think it's highlighted the fact that if you did want to bring in some sort of assisted suicide legislation, I mean, I am opposed on principle, but if you wanted to bring some in, a private member's bill is a very poor way of doing it. There aren't the opportunities for scrutiny. There are all sorts of consultations that don't happen under private members' bills. And really, I mean, private members' bills are there for doing things like, banning pet theft and, fairly kind of obscure, niche, minor interest things.
The weekly virtue signalling bill.
Exactly.
We're against bad stuff.
Exactly.
What was that one the other week about there's not enough female footballers?
Yeah, exactly.
On Hallmark cards.
Things like that, make penny sweets only cost a penny or something like that. But so this is not what the private member bill process is designed for. But nevertheless, it is a tool of social liberals that has been used repeatedly. I mean, the abortion law, for example. And on top of that, the fact that we say, it's a conscience vote, because MPs are so much more liberal than the public at whole and have been for 50 years, they've got a clear advantage in terms of parliamentary numbers. But what seems very, very concerning is that a lot of MPs voted for the bill at second reading on the basis that it would be well scrutinised, that the bill's proponents would be open to sensible amendments, and that safeguards would be considered. Now, I think the bill's fallen apart in committee stage because disabled rights groups, palliative care doctors, lawyers have all argued that it's either wrong or insufficient or full of holes or people be coerced. And yet very clearly Kim Leadbeater is trying to shut down debate. I mean, there's been extraordinary scenes of her actually interrupting witnesses, and being told off by the chair. But my worry is that anybody neutral following it or anybody objective or rational following it would say, hang on a minute, even if you're not opposed to assisted suicide in principle, this is not a safe bill. My worry is that so many Labour backbenchers, who I have to say just seem to just do whatever the party tells them, they won't, they're just interested in pleasing Keir Starmer, and he's very clearly in favour of this, and they'll just vote for it. And the consequences will just be astonishing. I mean, anyone who's looked at what happened in Canada, in even the kind of most cursory detail, no jurisdiction where assisted suicide has been brought in has it stayed within the narrow confines of the original bill.
Yeah.
Because once you've established a right to die, why should you not spread that right out to all sorts of other... Why 6 months? Why not 7? Why only adults? Why do you have to be terminally ill? Why not just suffering? Why not mental illness? Once you've crossed the Rubicon, once you've broken that kind of Western civilizational boundary that's been there since the dawn of Christianity, basically, that human life is sacred and it's not for others to take it away. It's not even for you to take it away. Then that's it. All bets are off.
Yeah. Tom.
The focus on safeguards, I think, has been really interesting. First of all, because a lot of these safeguards have turned out not to be safeguards at all. But if the entire focus of a piece of legislation passing is how can we protect innocent people from the consequences of your proposed reform, maybe it's not a very good reform to pass in the first place. The caginess around this has been shot through the whole process. I remember when it was originally in the House of Commons, the amount of tone policing that was going on, Daniel Kruger being told off for using the phrase suicide. And that has continued through. I mean, that blow up of the other week where originally it seemed like the committee were going to stop the Royal College of Psychiatrists from addressing them. Despite the fact that this piece of legislation will amend the Suicide Act, this is something that you would imagine the Royal College of Psychiatrists might have something to say about it. It's almost like they know that they're losing ground, that they're losing some of the moral authority on this issue. I think Kim Leadbeater's kind of tetchiness is indicative of that. And I think it's one in a long line of policies which have been pursued out of a mix of just wanting to look like a good person and ideology amongst a certain section of the political class, which they're slowly starting to realise that when it actually gets to grips with it, what sounds wonderful and liberal is actually quite unpleasant and sinister. And I think that the tetchiness will continue the more that gets unveiled.
There are some really deep contradictions at the heart of it. Yesterday, there was the almost laughable discussion about why people who want to want the state to end their life need proper mental health assessments because, and one of the doctors said, because some of them, they're just suicidal. It's like, well, no kidding. I mean, so she was arguing that people whose mental health is so poor that they're suicidal should not be allowed to commit suicide. I can't make sense of that.
Contacting the suicide service seems like the logical place to go.
So you should only be allowed to commit suicide if you're not suicidal. How does that work?
And it's interesting, the sort of politics of it. I mean, you're saying Keir Starmer's backing it. I mean, he, officially there's no three-line whip. It's not a Labour Party policy, but it seems to be the only principle that he holds. It seems to have been something that he has pursued himself. He relaxed a lot of the prosecutions around this when he was DPP back in the day. He seems to genuinely believe that this is a progressive moment, that it is his equivalent of legalizing same-sex relationships in the 60s or abortion, as you say. Where does that come from? I mean, how does someone who believes in nothing feel so strongly about this?
Everybody believes in something. Everybody does. If you don't believe, if you're not somebody with a religious worldview, so your worldview is not based on the teachings of the Bible or the Quran, then your worldview is based on something else. I mean, that might be liberalism, it might be socialism, but everybody acts as if they believe in something. And the problem with that, I mean, I think Keir Starmer's belief system is based on an understanding of human rights. Now, human rights originally comes from the Judeo-Christian view that human life is sacred. But it's been expanded well beyond that because people have been given the rights to all sorts of things which aren't natural rights. Like, do you have the right to healthcare? Well, only if I'm forced to pay for it. I'm not arguing that it's wrong to have a right to healthcare, but these are not kind of natural rights as Edmund Burke would have seen them. And so I think his view is found in this kind of liberal vision of human rights, which ultimate aim is to give every individual full autonomy over everything. And that is the kind of vision of self-actualization. But the truth is nobody has full autonomy. We're all dependent on other people. And if you extend that right to the right to kill yourself, then kind of where does that end up? Because how do you then stop other people from coercing you? And so he obviously does believe in something, and I think it's this kind of extreme version of human rights. But as you said, he's been relaxed about it. He made this absurd promise to Esther Rantzen that he would give time, which makes me think, and I'm obviously speculating, that came because the way the PMB process works. Every MP puts into a hat, essentially. The first 10 that are pulled out have got a good chance. And you can either do something that you've thought of yourself, or the government can hand you a bill. Yeah. And if the government hands you a bill, you'll get time for it, and it will pass. So,
I agree with a lot with that. The one thing I'd say is that this, the characterization of the assisted suicide thing as a sort of the excess of liberalism is something I have a bit of a problem with, though, because I am struck by the fact that so many people behind this piece of legislation, the only time they believe in freedom of autonomy is when it's for you to request the state to kill you or for you to remove perfectly healthy body parts to make it more in line with your own view of yourself. Like, they don't trust you to speak for yourself. They don't trust you to feed your own children. They don't trust you to go on the internet unaccompanied, all of these things. And yet it's on these very unique areas that they are suddenly using the language of freedom and autonomy and choice. And I think particularly with assisted suicide, this is the choice they're choosing to valorize. And it's the one that leads to the end of your life, to the destruction of any of autonomy you could possibly experience. I think that says something about, if this is a form of liberalism, it's a particularly morbid and warped.
I suppose the end point of liberalism is authoritarianism, because if the aim of life is to be as autonomous as possible, at the end of the day, what is the only entity that can protect you from having your autonomous choices taken away? It's the state. And so the state is, you see this absolutely in education. Parents don't even have the authority to see what their children are being taught in schools, because the children must have the autonomous right to, self-actualize, whatever it is. And so therefore the state must stop parents from preventing children from seeing it. But yeah, I agree. I mean, it is the most odd thing. And also, I think what's been interesting is that the traditional socialists that come from a more kind of Christian tradition have very much allied with the social conservatives in opposing this, whereas the progressives and the liberals or libertarians, the Conservative Party, have united in agreeing with it. So it's kind of thrown the whole left-right dichotomy into disarray, really.
Definitely. Thanks, Miriam. When can we next see you on GB News? This will be out on Friday. I should say,
Okay, so Friday evening I'll be on 6 or 7. It's such a different thing being on the asking question end to the answering, but I'm really enjoying it. And the channel's going from strength to strength. I mean, beating Sky News all the time now, BBC News some of the time, and it is it's a great fun place to work. I'm really enjoying it.